my honor to welcome all of you to the launch of our Zions Bank Community Speaker Series. The purpose of this speaker series is to bring members of our community together through the power of conversation. The theme of this series is to build inclusive cultures in the communities we serve. Zions Bank is a founding signer of the Utah Compact on Racial Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And we are committed to incorporating the values laid out in the Compact into every aspect of how we do business. To all of you, our community leaders and corporate partners in Utah joining us today, I would say that if you have not signed the Utah Compact, it's not too late. And I encourage you to do so by going to slcchamber/Utah Compact. We need all hands on deck to bring the vision of true equality and equity and opportunity and inclusion in our communities to life. Now, in honor of Pride Month, today's virtual gathering offers all of us an opportunity to listen and to learn from a panel of local community leaders who are willing to share their stories and experiences with us. And I want to thank each of our panelists for joining us today. And I acknowledge their passion and their leadership and their unwavering commitment to fighting for equality, opportunity, and justice for all members of our community, particularly those who identify as members of the LGBTQIA+ community. We recognize that although each of our paths are different, every person's path should be equally valued. When people feel valued, that is when they perform at their best and become meaningful contributors to society. As a bank, our role is to build economic inclusion by opening opportunity, increasing access, and investing our capital, our human capital, our social capital, and our financial capital. If we each do our part together, we will grow a healthy, prosperous, and thriving community. I want to thank our One Zions team and the leaders of our LGBTQIA+ Employee Business Forum, Chad and Dylan and Mikey and Kelly, who are responsible for organizing today's event. And I want to thank all of you, valued members of our community, who are zooming in to listen, to learn, and to lead out on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank you again for joining us today. Building a culture of inclusion begins with us. It begins with me, and it begins with you. With no further ado, I'd like to turn the time over to Sui Lang Panoke, our Senior Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, who will serve as the host of today's event. Sui Lang.
Thank you so much, Scott, for that warm welcome. And thank you, community, for showing up today to launch our Zions Bank Community Speaker Series. Your participation in these conversations, and most importantly, your actions after the conversation, are essential to bringing our vision of building inclusive cultures in our communities to life. As Scott mentioned, the purpose of this Community Speaker Series is to bring our community together through the power of conversation. This speaker series will host quarterly conversations aimed to address current and relevant topics related to diversity, equity, inclusion, while highlighting the important work that local leaders and organizations are doing in our communities. As a leader representing the private sector, we recognize in order to be successful in building a culture of inclusion in our community, it is important to align our efforts with leaders and institutions in the public sector as well. We are honored to have Nubia Pena, Senior Advisor on Equity and Opportunity and Director of Utah's Office of Multicultural Affairs, here with us to share some opening remarks on behalf of Governor Cox and the Cox administration. It is my pleasure to welcome Nubia Pena.
Thank you so very much, Sui Lang, and good afternoon to everyone. It is such a pleasure to be with you today, and I want to begin by thanking Mr. Anderson, the entire team and family at the Zions Bank for being able to host such an important conversation as your inaugural event to your community speaker series. It is an honor to join you on behalf of Governor Cox and the Cox-Henderson administration to share our support of our diverse community and join you in celebrating and acknowledging Pride Month. I feel privileged to be a part of an administration that is leading with a heart to serve all people and has committed to do so through words and actions. I was particularly grateful that Mr. Anderson's opening remarks referenced the Utah Compact on Racial Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, and has invited leaders to sign on and to commit to this important value statement that was founded on the principles that all people are created equal and that all Utahns must have an opportunity to prosper. On January 4th, of 2021, Governor Spencer Cox signed the compact at Fillmore City, Utah's first state capital, making the compact the first document that he signed as the 18th governor of Utah. Supporting the compact was also incorporated into the One Utah Roadmap, which is a dynamic document that shares the vision, principles, priorities, and action items of the Cox-Henderson administration for the first 500 days in office. Now, the roadmap draws from the promises made during the campaign, suggestions that were made through the transition process by bold community leaders such as Byron Russell, Sui Lang, Mayor Killeen Potter, Dr. Susan Madsen, and many, many more. If you haven't done so already, I do invite you to read the roadmap to gain a better understanding of the various initiatives that have been identified as integral to helping Utah recover beyond this pandemic and to set us up to thrive for future generations. Now, one of the 6 priorities that has been identified in the roadmap is to expand equality and opportunity and to improve life outcomes for people with historically and systemically less access to opportunity, including women, people of color, and LGBTQIA+ individuals. The roadmap reads, we recognize the unique inequities and varied experiences found within Black, Indigenous, Latino, Latinx, Asian, Middle Eastern, Pacific Islander, and multiracial communities. We commit to creating initiatives that acknowledge the history of our state and nation, the disproportionate outcomes across systems, and the intersectional identities of our community members. I am excited to share that great progress is already being made, and we are thankful that each of you are equally committed as community members and leaders willing to do your part to leave our communities better than we found them. And that includes healing the divides that keep us from honoring each other's full humanity. Through a coordinated and collaborative approach between all of us, our new administration hopes to help set us a course where all people in our state are able to thrive and contribute to what makes Utah such a great place to call home. And that includes feeling safe, feeling valued, and being fully accepted. For that reason, Governor Cox declared the month of June Pride Month in the state of Utah. This is something that has never been before done by a sitting governor. And I now have the privilege of reading the declaration. Whereas the month of June is commonly celebrated and recognized as LGBTQ+ Pride Month, whereas we must encourage relevant and vital conversations about what it means to love each other, understand our differences, and support our LGBTQ+ friends and family members. Whereas we recognize that members of the LGBTQ+ community who do not feel loved and accepted experience higher rates of mental health challenges. Whereas we can strengthen resilience in the LGBTQ+ community through family and community inclusion, and by providing access to help and giving them our support, respect, understanding, and friendship. Whereas we must cultivate a climate of inclusion and unconditional love for all. Whereas in the state of Utah, we strive to sustain a culture of hope, love, understanding, and respect by celebrating our common humanity. Whereas we should all strive to be more inclusive and accepting of the LGBTQ+ members of our community. Now, therefore, I, Spencer J. Cox, Governor of the great state of Utah, do hereby declare June 2021 as LGBTQ+ Pride Month in Utah. So that is an incredibly exciting declaration to read on behalf of our governor, to read on behalf of our administration. And before turning the time back to my dear sister in the movement, Sui Lang, I do want to thank the panelists who will share their truth, their stories, their journey, and their joy. And I hope that the words spoken today help build bridges across the differences so that we can collectively create a legacy of healing, hope, and change for many, many generations to come in the great state of Utah. Thank you once again for the opportunity to join you, to represent our team at the governor's office. And please know that I look forward to the conversation today. And it is now my pleasure to pass the time back over to you, Sui Lang. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, Nubia, I was so entrenched in your remarks. I almost forgot you were going to kick it back to me. Thank you so much for those inspiring words and to hear the words of the governor. I seriously have never been so proud to be a Utahn. It is so exciting to see how aligned our vision, philosophy, and strategies to One Utah are. Thank you so much for your passion, your leadership, and your commitment to this important work. Now, one of the key components of our diversity, equity, inclusion programming here at Zions Bank is our employee business forums. We currently have 9 employee business forums that are led by employees who identify as a member or an ally of each respective community. Today's event is sponsored by our LGBTQIA+ Employee Business Forum. Chad Dilley serves as chair of the forum, and Dylan Walker-Pecoraro and Mikey Reynolds serve as co-chairs. Dylan oversees communications and internal outreach, and Mikey oversees education and community outreach. It is my honor to turn the time over to Chad, who will introduce our panelists and moderate today's conversation.
So much, Sui Lang. We are so excited to be here. So thank you all for taking time today to join us. As Sui Lang mentioned, I work here at Zions Bank, and I'm the director of retail banking, retail branch banking, and serve as the chair of the LGBTQIA Business Forum, which is part of our bigger DEI initiative here at Zions. We couldn't be happier to be the inaugural Zions Bank Community Speaker Series kickoff to celebrate Pride Month. We've had a lot of interest from employees and the community around this, and we've gathered some questions that we're hoping will create a great conversation amongst our incredible panelists. So very much looking forward to that. Our mission is really to bring the community and employees together from Zions Bank and engage in a conversation about what's taking place in the LGBTQIA space in both Utah and Idaho and Wyoming, where we serve. Today's conversation, we're going to focus in 3 areas. So we'll kind of structure in that way. We'll start off with talking about personal experiences of the members of our panel. We'll then move into talking about professional experience and their experience in the workplace. And then we will finally move into policy related experience and what we as audience members can do to help advance the cause for this community. After we've wrapped up with that, we will dedicate some time to questions that have come in from the audience that you submitted during registration. We have some great conversation that should come from that. So very much looking forward to an engaging conversation. I encourage the panelists to add on if you have something to add on that wasn't asked directly to you, and bounce off of each other. So this should be a great conversation, and we're really thankful for all of you being involved. With that, let's go ahead and introduce our incredible panelists. We'll start with Jackie Biskupski. In 1998, Jackie became the first openly gay elected official in Utah, where she served in the House of Representatives for 13 years. During her time in office, she worked to defeat anti-gay legislation and helped develop the record of discrimination that would later be used in the Kitchen versus Herbert marriage equality case. In 2015, Jackie was elected as mayor of Salt Lake City, becoming the first lesbian to lead a capital city in our country. Jackie, we are so thankful to have you here. Thanks for joining us. As a way of the audience getting to know you, can you take just a minute and tell us what Pride Month means to you personally?
There we go. I'm unmuted. Well, thank you again for the invitation to be here, and I'm so excited so many people are listening. Pride Month for me is about a few things, but I think I have to start with it being about honoring the activists who were at the Stonewall Inn 52 years ago. This is a group of people who rose up against police brutality, and it sparked 6 days of protests that led to the LGBTQIA+ civil rights movement we know today. But it is also about celebrating all of me and the life I am living that is just filled with dignity and self-respect. I can't begin to tell you, how great that is for those of you who haven't come out yet. And for those of you who haven't, it's a time to help others get there and realize that your own pride is so important, and getting rid of the shame that has been brought into your life, whether it was through a religious teaching or oppressive societal norms or other people that are around you. Pride is about self-respect, and we should all be able to live with dignity and self-respect. And so this month is about helping all people get to that space and live in that space.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jackie.
You're welcome.
Okay, next we will introduce Representative John McCrostie. Representative McCrostie was the first elected, to the Idaho House of Representatives in 2014. McCrostie is the first out gay man and the first out LGBTQ person of color to serve in the Idaho State Legislature. Welcome, John. We're happy to have you. And I'd just like to ask you the same question. What does Pride Month mean to you personally?
Sure. Thanks so much, Chad. Thanks so much for having me today. And, as I look at Pride Month, one of the first things that I think about is just that now we're talking about it in terms of a month. When I had first come out, for me, it was in the Boise community, we were talking about an event on a weekend in June, and now we're celebrating it all month long. And to me, that represents such incredible growth within our community. For me personally, it's a time of personal reflection, and I just look at my own growth. When I had first come out, and I'm a school teacher, and at that point in time, I had actually left the teaching profession because I was afraid of being an openly gay school teacher, or what would happen if somebody found out. And so at that point in time, I had left the teaching profession, and so I had the freedom to attend my first Pride event. And looking at that event at that point in time, this was in the late 90s, and there were maybe, if there were 100 people at that Pride event, then it was probably a pretty good event, even though you were also counting the protesters. As we have evolved since then, we start to look at how many fewer protesters that there are at our events, or at this point, there may be somebody there, but with the thousands of people who come to celebrate Pride in Boise, you just don't notice them anymore. And people are so much more celebratory. Just as a personal matter, looking back 25 years ago as this scared former gay teacher, now I can live my life as a proud gay married man who can teach in a public classroom and serve in the Idaho legislature. So there's so much growth that I'm able to celebrate personally and celebrate for my community. And that's part of what Pride means to me.
Thanks, John. That's awesome. Okay, next we will introduce Troy Williams. Troy has been the executive director of Equality Utah for the last 6 years. Williams helped to pass Utah's historic LGBTQ non-discrimination protections in housing and employment. He also led efforts to rename 20 blocks of downtown Salt Lake City as Harvey Milk Boulevard. He worked to successfully overturn the state's no promo homo law, which prohibited discussion of LGBTQ issues in the classroom. In 2020, he also led the campaign to successfully protect minors from the dangerous practice of conversion therapy. Troy, thanks so much for being here with us. I'm going to ask you that same question, and if you can tell us what Pride means to you personally.
Yeah, thank you, Chad. Thank you, Zions Bank. Thank you, Sui Lang, all of you for organizing this great panel. Such an honor to be with so many great people this afternoon. So here at Equality Utah this month, we are celebrating the power of we, because we know that our movement isn't just one individual, it's all of us working together throughout the decades to get us to the point where we are today. So I like to use this month to celebrate where we've been, the battles we've fought, the victories that we've enjoyed, and then also look to the work ahead. What's not done? Who's not being included? Who's not being loved more? How do we sort of expand our capacity to bring people into the center? How do we expand allyship and bring more people to our Pride celebrations? So it really, to me, Pride is about celebrating our human potential to love more and to include more.
Awesome. Okay, and last but certainly not least, Jackie Cole. Jackie serves as the Zions Inclusion Champion and a branch service manager in our Idaho Resort region. She's been involved in equality work for nearly a decade. Jackie cycled from San Francisco to LA twice as part of an AIDS life cycle event, which she supports, which supports the Los Angeles LGBT Center and the San Francisco AIDS Foundation. She hopes to ride again in this event in the future. Jackie's personal and professional experiences have made her passionate about equality work and reinforced the importance of personal authenticity and fighting internalized homophobia and transphobia within the LGBTQIA community. Jackie, welcome.
Thanks so much, Chad. I really appreciate being here, largely because every single person on this call means that it does get better. It really does. It gets better, even on the days when we don't think it's getting better. It is getting better. For me, this month means so much. It means my nieces and nephews have freedom in their future. And dialogue in their future. They have dialogue with their friends already that just impresses me to no end, because it wasn't conversations that we could have when I was in high school or college. For me, it means bringing an end to transphobia for my transgender stepson. There are so many great things about this month. It means it really means the future, and it means happiness and health and joy and mental wellness for myself and the generations that come before me and the generations that come after me. So I'm really happy to be here. Thanks, Chad.
Awesome. Well, we're happy to have all of you. Again, thanks for being here. So as I mentioned, we're going to start off with kind of some personal questions about your experiences as a member of the LGBT community. And I want to kick it off with Jackie B. And ask you, you're a very powerful leader in our community, both just the wider community and the LGBTQ community. And I loved in your opening remarks how you kind of referred to the people who haven't had the opportunity to come out yet. So my question for you is, how have you evolved to become a leader, and what did that process look like, and what's been your experience with, becoming such a leader in our community?
Sure. Well, I can tell you that in my early 20s, before I even ran for office, that was a real time of confusion for me. And that was due to the teachings of the Catholic Church that I grew up in. So I really had to overcome that oppression through my own personal relationship with God, which brought me a great deal of peace and happiness, and enabled me to experience the greatest love of all, and that's unconditional love. It was a group of students at East High School who were trying to form the first gay-straight alliance that even got me to want to be involved in my community and inspired me to evolve as a person who is part of the LGBTQIA+ community. So I will forever be grateful to that group of students. they were trying to form that club back in 1994, 95. And it took so long for them to get through the court system that they never formally even got to meet as a GSA. But they also understood the value of it and the importance of fighting for that right to meet. And of course they won. We all are benefiting from that. So I evolved over a great deal of time, you know, coming out to get married. You know, back then we couldn't get married, but I had a wedding, and that was in the early 90s as well. And then once I was out, I went after everything that I felt like I wanted to have in my life. And now I'm a mother of 2 sons, and I am legally married to a lovely woman. And, you know, we have the opportunity and the people around us that are supporting us and enjoy their friendship, and they enjoy ours. And we have, you know, a full family experience going on, which was a real battle for most of my career to even have that. So, you know, I'm evolving every day still too. And I think most of us are.
Thanks for sharing that with us, Jackie. Next, I'm going to come over to you, Troy, and just ask, this was actually one of the biggest questions that we got from our audience members. And they asked, what can friends and family and coworkers do to be allies of the LGBTQ plus community? And what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, to me, the core of allyship is friendship. And you have to sort of show up for your friends. And so we, you know, as a community, you know, our pride festivals, our events, our galas, they're open to everybody. Show up, come to the parade, come to the festival, join in the celebrations. Is one of the best thing you can be. And when you are outwardly facing that you are an ally, that you are a friend to our community, you're going to be surprised at how many people come out to you. When they know that you're someone who's loving and accepting, you're going to find people all over the place coming out to share their secret if they're not out yet. And so it's really about just opening your hearts, opening your arms to our community. When there's legislation that might have a harmful impact on our community, call your representative. You know, let them know that you're opposed to that legislation. Conversely, if there's a bill that supports our community, call your lawmakers, let them know that you support that. Be vocal about it. It's so important that we reach out to each other and build these connective relationships together, because that's truly the core of allyship.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, John, next question is for you. Do you have an example of something that may have happened to you where others could learn about acceptance and how to potentially change their approach with individuals in our community?
You know, I was thinking about this question, and I don't know if it directly applies, but one of the things that had jumped to my mind was there was a Pride event in Boise, and I had a booth that year as I was running for office, and one of my students had come up to me, and you know, even though I feel comfortable now as an openly gay teacher, so I'm a music teacher, and so I don't talk about, I generally don't talk about my husband or anything like that during my class. And so here's one of my students that comes up to me and wants one of the stickers that I'm passing out that says McCrostie on it. And he's just there celebrating with his parents. And one of the lessons that I learned that day was not to prejudge people. That, you know, first of all, students are so open and receptive. And if they're there to celebrate Pride, and they want to come and see me and say hi, and Mr. McCrostie, you remember me? I'm in your band class. those moments are just really precious. And I guess my lesson is to not to prejudge people. People will surprise you at just about every opportunity, and especially young people.
Absolutely, absolutely. Do any of the other panelists have thoughts on that of something that's happened to you where you learned a different approach to acceptance? Anybody have anything to add there?
Yeah, I could add something. When I was first elected, there were colleagues that wouldn't look me in the eye or even shake my hand. And I think what was very helpful was for me to remain open to trying to establish a relationship with them and provide them a space where they could get comfortable. And today it's really different. I don't have those types of experiences anymore. I do know that some people do. And I know we're kind of exhausted, many of us for different reasons even, about trying to be accepted. But if you have self-respect and you hold yourself, and your head high and people can see that, I do think people will move more quickly in your direction and are drawn to that, actually.
Can I add something to that, Chad? Just because Jackie had brought that up, that reminded me of there was a bill that we had in Idaho, and it was when I was during my first session, and the bill that the legislator had brought was basically going to insist that any federal judges who supported marriage equality should be impeached. And there were always those kinds of ridiculous bills that are out there, particularly in Idaho. But as the second openly gay person, the first openly gay man, when this bill was presented, I did feel compelled to stand up, and I reminded the body that I would never bring a bill that would tell any of them that their marriages were worth less. And while I'm sorry that there were people in the body who were crying as a result of that, and they felt bad, some of them felt so bad that they supported my position. What I found at that moment in time was, because I was able to stand up and to speak on behalf of, and not just for myself, but for all LGBT couples, we stopped having anti-LGBT or overtly anti-LGBTQ bills. I'm going to correct myself, anti-gay bills. We've certainly seen our wave of anti-trans bills recently, but at least from that point on, in Idaho, being in the room and being at the table has meant at least that we've stopped having anti-gay attacks. As a matter of speaking up and stepping out.
Absolutely. Representation matters, and that's a perfect example of why. So thank you both for the comments there. That kind of leads me to my next question. And Jackie, in your bio, you talk about transgender rights and avoiding transgender phobia. How do you feel that members of our community can be more focused on transgender individuals, their acceptance, and using things like proper pronouns?
Chad, I think I'll be really honest. My work, my personal work in that is relatively new. And it's because I had somebody come into my life recently that is part of their life. And so it is a daily learning process for me. Pronouns don't come naturally sometimes. And I have to navigate, how to deal with that when I mess up. I have done, I know it sounds ridiculous, and I'm not a paid representative of TikTok, but I will be honest, I've done a lot of watching TikTok. There are amazing content presenters there who are non-binary or transgender, and it is really amazing. I know you're just, passively watching videos, but it's amazing what you can learn. I think it's about going out and finding resources, whether it's Google or books or friends who are transgender or non-binary. I think it's about finding resources for yourself. I think that's the biggest thing that we can do, and being honest with ourselves and practicing every day, because it's not always natural, because we have been sort of indoctrinated socially with certain norms, and they're just not real. So it's practice. I think that's the biggest thing.
I'd love to jump in as well. Sometimes if you're watching this, and sometimes you'll start to see that we'll start popping pronouns into our email signatures, on our Zoom profiles. And the reason why we do that is because there's not just gay and lesbians in the LGBT community. We have transgender folks, we have non-binary or gender non-conforming individuals, and we don't want there to be any mystery about how to address us. So it's really common for us just to put our pronouns in, take the mystery away, and So that's just one easy way of just showing your allyship as well to the trans community. And I'll tell you, it's like seeing history repeat itself. Back in the early 90s, Jackie B will know this so well, there was just an onslaught of anti-LGBT bills across the country, and here in Utah as well. We're seeing that now with the transgender community. Over 30 states introduced bills to restrict the rights and liberty of the transgender community. And that kind of moral panic, that hysteria that ignited state houses back in the 90s and the early aughts, that same kind of moral panic is happening today in state houses across the country. Because now people are familiar with the LGB community, more comfortable, as John was noticing. He's not facing anti-gay bills in the Utah or the Idaho legislature. We're not in the Utah legislature. But there's still a lot of information that people don't know about the trans community, because they're coming out now on an unprecedented scale, and they're claiming their rights and their liberties as Americans, as Utahns. And I'll tell you all this, and Mayor Jackie will confirm this. Every pro-marriage rally we had, when we stood on the stage to advocate for equality, I looked out into the crowd and I saw my transgender siblings right there beside us, cheering us on. Now their community is under attack, and it's up to the LGB members of our community to stand up in solidarity and let our trans siblings know we are with you every step of the way, and we all cross the finish line together.
Yes, I can add to that as well, if you don't mind, because Troy's absolutely right. And even when we were dialoguing around the hate crimes legislation back in the day, there was a desire to throw the trans people out just to get the bill. And not only were I or David Litvak or Archie Archuleta all saying not only no, but heck no, we had to stick together. And we knew that, because together you rise, and if there's division, you fall. So absolutely, people need to get informed too. And Jackie was mentioning how important it is to educate yourself on all the different gender identities that exist in our world today. It is not a him or her anymore. And we are evolving slowly around this, but we have a lot of work to do. And it's super helpful if people just get themselves informed, and then put your pronouns on your information so that people know what they are. And I think eventually we will all be comfortable asking what someone's pronoun is, and that'll become the norm at some point.
I got chills as you guys were answering those questions. It's just incredible the allyship within the community. And I think coming together, learning more, and I know I'm not supposed to put my opinions in, but I just loved everything that was just said. So thank you guys so much for those comments. With that, I think we'll switch into the professional section and start talking about kind of our experiences in the workplace, things that have happened. And, you know, over this last week, Carl Nassib, an NFL player with the Raiders, just came out as openly gay, which he's the first, openly gay active NFL player to do so. As we talked about, you know, representation being key and having people for kids or adults to look up to that are comfortable there. I want to hear Jackie B again. What has it been like being a member of this community in your field? We talked about you being the first lesbian mayor of a major capital city. How has that experience been, and what has it been like breaking barriers?
Yeah, you know, in the beginning of my career, it was really challenging. Like, I was the only gay person. There wasn't an Equality Utah. I was working with an attorney to help, you know, defeat legislation. So, you know, we have come quite far, but not very far. And I want to kind of lay the groundwork so you have a context there. But I was first elected in '98 and then became mayor in 2016. So at that time, I was the only mayor, female lesbian, of a major city in our country. Today we have several more, which is super exciting. A lot has happened in the last, you know, 4 years, 5 years. But to kind of lay the land a little bit, there's only 2 lesbian attorney generals, and no one else on the LGBTQIA spectrum has been elected to that office. We have our first bisexual woman who is a governor and our first gay man who is a governor. We have our first US senator, which is Tammy Baldwin. In 2020, we witnessed the first Black openly gay men get elected to Congress. There are not many of us. There's really not. In fact, 1% of all elected positions in the United States are filled with people who identify as LGBTQIA+ people. So it can be pretty lonely, but we are making some progress, and, you know, we love our headlines when we get them.
Yeah, can I jump on that question as well? You know, to be, you know, like Jackie was talking about, you know, when you're the first and you're the pioneer, it's certainly a challenge. You know, however, once that, you know, after me, there's going to be a second openly person of color. There's going to be a second openly gay man serving in the Idaho legislature. And once we're talking about seconds instead of the firsts, you know, one of the newer mantras that's coming from the Victory Fund is to make historic firsts history. And it's great to shatter that barrier, but it's going to be so much better after we're talking about the second. And we're talking more about policy rather than about breaking that glass ceiling.
Absolutely. John, you kind of led in. You guys are doing a great job of transitioning for me. The next question I was going to ask was, you know, you are the first out gay man to serve up there. And when you kind of became self-actualized in that experience, what was that like? And for those in our audience that may be just coming out in the workplace for their first time, how did you balance that and approach kind of the workplace situation?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And, you know, when I think about self-actualization, I think of it in terms of a process rather than an isolated moment in time. You know, when I first came out, it was like truly just acknowledging to myself that I'm gay. And then it's acknowledging that to my parents. And then it's finding safety in the workplace. And then it's finding a company that is going to support me. So, you know, for me, as I look at my own self-actualization, it has been a real process of growth to finally get to a place where you can be the first openly gay male legislator in Idaho's history. I think for me, at the end of the day, a lot of it is honoring my spouse, my husband. And I don't want to jump through pronoun hoops to, if someone thinks that that I'm married to a woman, I want to be able to acknowledge, yeah, he's a man and I love him with all my heart. And so I guess for me, it's about acknowledging my truth, and part of my truth is my relationship.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, John. Troy, I wanted to ask, I know you in the past worked with the Utah Eagle Forum, and I wanted to ask, what challenges have you maybe experienced in the workplace or in professional settings like that? But more importantly, what can we learn from those experiences, and what can we take away as an audience?
Yeah, well, it's pretty easy to be gay at Equality Utah. So I don't have a lot of conflicts here at my work. Yeah, I mean, I've been very fortunate. Yeah, I did, when I first moved to Utah, I was so scared that I might be gay, that I started volunteering for the Utah Eagle Forum, and I was Gail Rizdika's intern, the leading anti-gay crusader in the state, who was making Mayor Jackie's life miserable up on Capitol Hill in the 90s. She's still up there. She never misses a day. And she really trained me, actually, how to be a lobbyist, how to actually go up there and testify in committee hearings, how to move a bill from one chamber to the next, how to persuade lawmakers. And so I give Gail credit for all of Equality Utah's successes over the past few years. And we've had this really kind of dynamic, interesting, complex, sometimes vitriolic relationship throughout the years. But Gail's tenacity, I think, has really inspired our community to step up our game in a big way. And despite all the efforts to restrict the liberties of our community, Utah was the first state in the country to overturn a ban on gay marriage. Utah was the first state to pass employment and housing protections in a Republican-controlled legislature. First time a pro-LGBT bill had ever passed through a Republican-controlled legislature. Utah became the 19th state and the most conservative state in the country to protect minors from the dangerous practice of conversion therapy. So sometimes the opposition that we have received throughout the decades actually has strengthened us, made us more powerful and more committed for equality and justice in our state.
Absolutely, absolutely, love that. Okay, thanks, Troy. Jackie, Jackie C, sorry, I keep forgetting to use the last letters. Jackie C, one of the things that people on this call may be considering is, as they come out in the workplace, they may be concerned about how that could impact their experience with their supervisor, et cetera. So I'm curious if you can tell us about a situation where you may have navigated with a supervisor who wasn't necessarily supportive of you. And again, what can we learn from that?
Chad, thanks so much. This is a question I really appreciate. So it's really interesting. I started out as a corporate trainer with Alaska Airlines years and years and years ago, and I was never out. Nobody knew anything about me there. I was very careful to keep my life private not because of anybody's behavior. I never had it displayed to me that would be a problem, but I felt that way. I wasn't ready to deal with that yet. So then fast forward a little bit, and I come into banking through a long, circuitous path that I will not walk you through, but I fell into banking, and my first supervisor in banking, I knew that she hadn't seen her son before he died of AIDS. And that made it obvious. Then my choice was made for me. If I wanted the job, I better keep my mouth shut. So I did for a long time. And then she became not my supervisor. I worked in a different department, and I had a supervisor who was supportive and wonderful. And it opened doors for me to start talking and being more honest about who I was, and bringing more of me to the job every day. was amazing. And that previous supervisor sort of just disappeared off the radar. And then a few years down the line, I came up against a supervisor that I just couldn't beat. He wanted my job because of who I was. And at first I thought I was imagining it until a coworker of mine who wasn't particularly, vocal about LGBTQ matters turned to me and said, "Oh, he doesn't know you're gay, does he?" Making it clear that that really was the issue. It wasn't my imagination. And he was too tough. I couldn't beat him. I wound up leaving that job, and I will probably always be mad at myself for not calling the HR department on the way out and saying, for an amazing corporation with amazing cultural and ethics at the corporate level, you have not just a bad apple, you have a dangerous apple. And you need to do something about it. You need to either train better or have a direct conversation with that person. I never had that conversation. And I know I've left other people behind at that corporation under that supervisor who feel as I did, if not worse, because they can't even come out of the closet. At least at that point, I was out. And I could live in that truth. And I knew I was right. I wasn't what this person projected me to be. But I'll always be mad at myself for not going to that HR department. And I think that's the thing that will guide me in the future. I'm so lucky to be at a place where that was one of the conditions actually for me taking the job. I said, I have a salary requirement, a vacation requirement, and I'm never going back in the closet requirement. And if that's a problem, I won't come on board. And it wasn't, thank goodness, because now I work here and it's been fantastic. But that will be a guiding principle for me for the rest of my life. If there's a problem, if I see something, I'll say something.
Thanks for sharing that, Jackie. That's awesome. That's really great. Wow. Okay. So Troy, one more back to you on this. And Troy and the whole panel, actually, I'm curious to know your thoughts as we kind of wrap up in this workplace professional setting. What can business leaders do to create a more inclusive and welcoming environment for members of the LGBTQ community?
Yeah, well, diversity, inclusion, and belonging are great buzzwords in the corporate sector right now. Everyone's talking about that. There's often, DEI specialists, but truly a commitment to it has to come from the very top. And it can't just be rhetoric. I often talk to folks because Equality Utah, we actually train and certify companies with a business equality leadership program. We come in and we do LGBTQ focused D&I training and allyship training. And one of the things that I talk to companies all the time, I'll find someone who has the position in the company of doing the DEI rep, who has no power, who has no ability to make change, has no sort of economic power, and feels like they're just kind of there as a placeholder or checking a box. As the top, the C-suite has to be deeply committed to really expanding who is on your slate when you are hiring, when you are recruiting people, and then also creating an internal culture where people feel free to bring their full self to work. One of the fears that we had when marriage equality became the law of the land, before we had non-discrimination protections, people were afraid that even though they could get legally married over the weekend, that on Monday, if they put a picture of their spouse on their desk, that they could be fired or denied a promotion or excluded from workplace activities. So it's really critical that the C-suite sees that the true benefit of a diverse workforce. It's got to come from the top.
That's such a full answer, and I hate to try to follow that. The one thing that I want to add is just a reminder that as we talk about diversity and inclusion, that we're not participating in the culture wars. There's a whole separate culture wars that's taking place outside in our communities within the workplace. And I learned this when while I was working for Hewlett Packard here in Boise, and just being able to be part of that that corporate culture, that there's a business need, that when you as an employee, when you feel safe, that I don't have to jump through the pronoun hoop, when I can put a picture of my spouse on my desk and not worry about it. That's when my productivity is expanding. That's when I have the freedom to give the best to my work and not having to jump through the mental hoops. There's a legitimate business reason for diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts that goes so much beyond, and that quite frankly shouldn't even be part of the culture wars.
Well, and I can add to that as well, just from a personal experience. While I was mayor, it was very important to me to make sure that every person that was appointed to the role of director understood kind of my mission and vision as a leader. And part of that included, diversity and equity and inclusion. And that also means, like Troy was saying, people have to be able to see that they'll get promoted and be out at the same time. They have to see that everyone in the room who is a decision maker isn't just one demographic, but it is multiple demographics, because that also is a good indicator that you do have upward mobility, that this company does, or this organization does value diversity and inclusion in all forms of leadership and at the highest levels. So I think that's really important. I know that when you are surrounded by all the same people, you are missing perspectives and true opportunities to grow as a company. And that change, it will only benefit your organization.
Absolutely. Thank you all for those important points there. So thank you. Okay, with that, let's shift into our last formal section, being the policy-related piece. And just a reminder that after we finish this, we'll get to these questions. We see some great questions coming in on the chat as well. So with this piece, we do just want to talk about kind of what you've done in your experience to date, and also as we kind of move through what individuals in the audience can do to help advance some of these policies as well. So Jackie B, we'll start with you. Again, here, you've done a lot. We talked about some of your accomplishments, but can you talk about some of the policies that you've helped drive through your experience in government here in Utah?
Sure. Well, so much of my work was really on Capitol Hill. I spent 13 years up there, and like Troy was mentioning, and I mentioned as well, it was really a time to defend ourselves. There were relentless attacks, and it was on everything from marriage equality to adoption to estate planning. You couldn't even will something to your partner without a family feud back then. So, it was really important that we did these battles against discrimination and created that record, because I think it really revealed what was happening here, and that there was this underlying bigotry of oppression that was happening, and it really came to light during the Kitchen v. Herbert case, which is what helped us win marriage equality, not just here, but in this entire country. So that work was really important to me, and landmark winning case to follow was more than I could hope for in my lifetime. So to see that happen in 2016 was pretty amazing.
Well, and it had a direct impact on a lot of us here on the call. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jackie. And the work goes on, right? As several have said, there's a lot more going on today. So, Troy, Governor Cox's representative earlier kind of mentioned about June officially being declared as Pride Month in the state of Utah. Can you tell us what that means to you and your thoughts behind that?
Yeah, I started crying. In fact, I think I texted Nubia, tears of joy. It was last spring, there was 4 people running for governor, and we hosted, Equality Utah hosted a gubernatorial forum with all of the GOP candidates for governor before the primary, which I believe is the first time this has ever happened in the history of our country. And all 4 of them committed to making sure that LGBT people were at the table on all issues that impacted us, our community. And I am so proud of Governor Cox. He made that commitment in the forum with us, and he has walked his talk on an unprecedented scale. We're all on this journey together. And we have seen people who we thought were our opponents or thought were our adversaries kind of shift and open their hearts and become allies and friends to our community. And to see this happen through the Cox administration has been so phenomenal. And it's not just a declaration on paper. We are meeting with Governor Cox on a regular basis. He was very helpful to us when we were facing legislation this past session. He has really come. He's also come and met with kids and who at the Encircle houses. Lieutenant Governor Henderson has toured the Pride Center and come to the Pride Festival this year. We're seeing an outreach on an unprecedented scale, and it's just creating a more inclusive and loving state for all of us to call home.
Absolutely. It's so great to see kind of unexpected allies that we have. And I read his article that he did with the Deseret News in the last couple of weeks. And just him encouraging people to be open and welcoming. And, he's taken some flack for that. And it's nice to see a leader stepping up and supporting a community that he's not necessarily a part of. So thank you for that. John, when are we going to get that going up in Idaho as well?
You know what? I just have to applaud you all in Utah and your governor. Just like Troy, I listened to that proclamation and my heart was just so warm. If you all can, if you all want to send him up our way, I mean, it's just not too much farther up north. So, bring him on over. We'll take him. But in all seriousness, if there's a way to do something that's comparable in our state, we would love to get some good direction, particularly with Idaho being as similar politically. It would be nice to kind of figure out how to celebrate everyone in our state the way that you all are doing in Utah. So kudos to you all.
It really is incredible to see. So John, I'll start with you on this, but I definitely open this up to the whole panel as well. For those listening in the audience today, you're very experienced with helping drive policy. What can we do to help further some of these movements and help in these policy discussions as members of the community?
Oh, I love this question. To start with, and Troy really spoke to this a little earlier, on your Zoom profile, on your email signature line, add your preferred pronouns. Let folks know that is something that you recognize their truth as you're sending your emails out or you're on a Zoom call. In your conversations, use inclusive pronouns. Refer to your significant other or to a spouse or to their spouse. You can use they and them, and that is an acceptable singular pronoun, and it is gender non-specific if you're using it that way. On a larger scope, make sure that you are registered to vote. And when you have the opportunity, take every opportunity to vote, whether you're voting for the governor, the president of the United States, or the director of your local water district. All of those all of those elections matter, and they have significant impact all the way up and down the ticket. Get involved. Finally, I would say get involved with campaigns that reflect your values. That may mean knocking on doors. It may be making phone calls or sending text messages or donating to candidates who support your values. If you want to make a change, the big way to make a change is at the voting booth.
Well, and you can run for office.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think yeah, great point, Jackie.
And I'm going to tag on to that as well. I completely agree. Vote, 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 but also don't be a one issue voter. Get educated on all of it. Determine who's going to serve the most of your needs, not that one thing. It's really important to be educated across a broad spectrum of issues and not just vote emotionally on one issue. The other thing is to bring the groundswell. We know that American politics works from the grassroots up, and we can make a difference just in our daily lives by, like John said, using pronouns, giving people our pronouns, asking our LGBTQIA+ brothers and sisters about their lives, the way that we would ask our straight friends about their lives. I have plans over the weekend with my partner. Ask me about those. Don't avoid that question. You don't avoid it with your straight friends. Don't avoid it with me.
And I also, with my staff, we often talk about we have to be queer missionaries to people. And I feel that it's so important for us if we really want to create a systemic and seismic change. We have to have the courage and the convictions to sit down with people who don't share our views, who don't understand our community, who have questions about things, who may be scared of the changes that are happening, and to sit with them in love, not necessarily to convince them that you're right and they're wrong, because that never persuades anybody, but sitting with warm hearts towards people who have different points of view and seeing where you might find common ground. And I've had to do this, this is a kind of almost a spiritual practice, because I have these very conservative relatives in Utah County, cousins, aunts, and uncles, and I kept them out of my life for close to 2 decades because I just assumed that they wouldn't want to have the gay cousin who was doing protests in the streets downtown Salt Lake City and was this advocate. And I really cut them out of my life. And they started reaching out to me first. They voted for the other guy. They have all these views that I are not sort of congruent with mine. But I decided to sort of go and just sit with them and keep my heart open. And the more that I did that, the more I recognized, the more that I was just available to answer questions and to sort of educate them. They wanted to know about transgender kids in sports. And it's much better that information they get comes from me, who's actually friends with trans people, than the echo chamber that they're getting on their partisan cable news, or with the social media algorithms that are blocking them out of ideas that don't correspond with their own political beliefs. We have a lot working against us, but we've got to figure out how to build bridges. Harvey Milk made this great quote that if we are to live in harmony with each other, we must create bridges from community to community. And we have to do that because our country is fraying right now. We are so polarized. There is so much contempt for each other. We're attacking each other on social media. We've got to figure out a way through this to keep our democracy healthy and to keep our families intact.
Absolutely. Bringing people together. Couldn't agree more. Jackie B, I love that you brought up not only voting, but also, running for office. And so what resources are there available for somebody who may be interested in running? How do they start that? Or what are resources to get involved and make a difference?
Sure. if you are in a partisan politic setting, like running for the legislature, you pick a party to run with, and that's how you show up on the ballot. When you're running for city council or mayor, that's not partisan, and you don't have to go down that road. But if you're involved in partisan politics, there are a lot of resources, you know, the Republican state party, the Republican county party, the Democratic state party, and so on. And every organized political party has resources for you to tap into. Some are greater than others, but that's there. There are also organizations like Real Women Run, which is an organization I started, which is a nonpartisan group, just elevating women to want to run for office by helping them understand the process, taking them through trainings, making sure that, you know, the mystery or the fear of putting yourself out there is alleviated some, and then giving advice on how you do the fundraising and the canvassing and all of that. So those types of trainings exist out there as well. I think Equality Utah does them. So does HRC, I believe, and Victory Fund and other groups in the LGBTQ community do these trainings as well to really help candidates rise to the occasion.
Yeah, I just want to really quickly add on to specifically for candidates who are LGBTQ, and these can be for partisan and nonpartisan races. One of my pins today is my Victory Fund LGBTQ elected official pin. Frankly, if it weren't for their support and the training that they provided, I would not have been able to be as successful to get into the legislature to begin with, and to be here 7 years later. There's so much to be said about LGBTQ representation in every facet of government, as we were talking to a little earlier. So I won't beat that horse too much more. But for anybody who's out there who is LGBTQ and thinking about you know, maybe the one way that I can make an impact in my community is to run for office, the LGBTQ Victory Fund is a great way to, a great resource to tap into.
Right, it looked like you were going to add on to that. Did you have something to add?
Me? No, I'm ready to jump to the Q&As though. There's some good questions coming in. So. Okay,
awesome. Well, perfect. That will wrap up our policy related piece then. Thank you all for your comments there. Really appreciate it. And Troy just let in again. You guys are the perfect transitioners. We'll get right into the Q&A questions. And I'm going to start with one that was submitted before, and we'll kind of integrate some of these ones that are coming in live as well. So the first one, Troy, I'm going to direct at you, and that is, how do we move the needle in Utah on religious liberty so that people understand that it can still be discrimination?
Good question. And I'm going to sort of like answer that question with this other question that came in. How do we work to find common ground with people who may believe that we are lesser? So my answer, I'm going to tackle both of them together at the same time. First off, I reject the framework that LGBTQ rights and religious liberty are eternally and fundamentally at odds and that they're always going to be at war. I reject that premise right out. Religious liberty is one of the founding values of our nation, protected in the First Amendment of our country. And every one of us as Americans have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We can coexist. We do coexist. And in Utah, we figured out how to thread that needle. You can protect LGBTQ rights without diminishing religious liberty. And you can protect religious liberty without oppressing LGBTQ people. It takes a lot of work. It takes sitting down with people who you don't agree with, and it takes a lot of good, really smart attorneys. But there are ways to thread those needles to protect both. And as a result, we've seen significant changes amongst the populace and in their attitudes towards these things. So we passed our non-discrimination law in 2015. We worked closely with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to do so. And it was a collaboration with Republicans, with Democrats, with the Church with Equality Utah, and we found a way to sort of find that balance and to thread that needle. In 2019, there was the Public Research and Religion poll came out that Utah had the second highest ranking of support for non-discrimination protections, LGBTQ non-discrimination protections. We were tied with Vermont, and we were just behind New Hampshire. We had more public support for non-discrimination protections than California, New York, or Oregon. Second in the nation, the second highest support in the nation. And now I'm looking at polls that just have come out recently that 70% of Americans support marriage equality. So how do you find common ground with people who don't think like you, who might think you are lesser? You open your heart to them. You respect them, and then they respect you, and you have dialogue and you build friendships with them. And when you do that, hearts begin to open and minds then follow, right? Minds change after hearts open, and then the laws really truly do follow after that. So it's really hard work. And we have a social media echo chamber and partisan 24-hour news that tells us to hate each other. Every single day, we're being told to hate each other. Well, I'll tell you, I have Mormon family, and I don't hate them, and they don't hate me. And we have got to find the courage to sit down together, especially as we're talking about how to advance these protections federally. We want to make sure that every LGBTQ American has the most robust protections possible. And we can do that without violating religious liberty, but we've got to stop the culture war. We've got to stop the culture war.
Thanks, Troy.
That's my soapbox.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, so for these next questions, I'm just going to open it to the panel. These are all from the audience, so feel free to jump in where you'd like and just answer these. So we'll start with Mitch's question that says, I've started to become more involved locally and have become increasingly aware of the lack of resources in our city for LGBTQ plus youth. What can we do to start to bring more of those resources into our community and help this group of youth that need our support?
I'll pitch in on this one. We just had our first Pride in the Wood River Valley in Blaine County, Idaho. First ever. It was also my first Pride. I'd never gotten to go to one before. It was great. And we invited every GSA to Pride, and they all had a booth, and they were all there. They were talking, they were seeing people who were older than them, who were out and vocal and who were there to support them. Get in, talk to them. And help them raise money, talk to them about what they can do for fundraisers, and be visible for them.
Thank you. Excellent. Okay, in corporate America, this is from Kurt. In corporate America, particularly banking, since there are 3 on the phone, how much does engagement and representation at the very top matter?
I'll tell a story on if it's okay, I'll jump back in again. I'll tell a story on Scott Anderson. Just this week, I had someone who had worked under him when he first started building diversity at Zion's. We wound up crying in the lobby of our bank here because it was such a huge thing. And Scott didn't just stand for LGBTQIA plus rights. He stood for gender equality. He stood for people of color. He stood for everyone. And he definitely, and I'm really hoping he's not on this call still listening, but he really did make this culture. He expected the best of the people who worked for him, and they rose to it. There was no equivocation from his office on how he stood on this matter, and he expected the best, and they rose to it. I think it's paramount. It is so important.
Yeah, and I'll add to this too, because my experience in working for a corporation and then my experience as being an openly gay mayor really presented two different stories, but both were really telling. So in my corporate job, this is back in the 90s, you know, I had a white male boss who went the extra mile to make sure I could get transferred and live with my wife back then. And he pursued ensuring I was treated equally. He was a very informed, educated, non-judgmental human being. And that made a huge difference in my life back then. And then the other piece to this as mayor and being openly gay and being visible to my employees revealed to me that employees were not comfortable being out until I was there. And then they were coming out and they were telling me they were coming out, or they were coming to Pride and they were saying, I have never been to Pride, I was too afraid. And you're talking Salt Lake City employees. I mean, the most liberal city in the state, and still people were not feeling safe until I was there. So I think it's very important that not only should the straight allies of the world be welcoming and work through issues in a way that people feel like they're treated equally, but also we have to be elevated, not just to the diversity, inclusion, and equity type positions, but we need to be elevated into the boardrooms and the C-suites and be at the table so that there is that lens on the decisions that are getting made. And then employees will see themselves in leadership. And that brings a whole different feel and vibe into the workspace.
Well done. So, man, I wish we had another 30 minutes because there are so many questions coming into that I'm so sorry we're not going to get to. Just in the spirit of giving everybody a chance to kind of wrap up what you may hope that we can walk away with, I'm going to give each of you 1 minute to just give a key takeaway from today that you'd like the audience to leave with, that can help make a difference in this community or move us forward. And I'm going to go in the opposite order that we started with. So I'll start with Jackie Cole. If you can just quickly 1 minute key takeaway. Oh, you're on mute.
Take two. Okay. Honestly, what Troy said earlier is so important, to approach all of this with open hearts, open minds, my own included, not only for my own internalized homophobia, transphobia, but also for the other side of the aisle. We have to come together before we come apart. We really do.
Absolutely. John.
First of all, this has been such an incredible panel. Thanks for allowing me to be part of this. If I had two things that I would leave with everybody here, in terms of balancing religious beliefs and the LGBTQIA plus community, love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. The second takeaway comes from Harvey Milk. Harvey Milk had the famous speech, "You've got to give them hope. You've got to give them hope."
Love that. Love that. Troy.
Yeah, let's keep building hope. Let's build on that. It has never been a greater time to be in America, in the world, to be LGBTQ. And yes, we have huge challenges ahead of us. There is still so much work to do. There is inequity to address. But if you don't take the time to celebrate the victories and the successes that we've had and to honor the people before us who made all of those victories possible, thank you, Mayor Jackie, then we are going to be discouraged and burned out and weary and tired, and we'll never have the strength that we need to create the change that needs to happen. So take the moments, celebrate where we are, and then look ahead to the very positive future ahead of us.
Thanks, Troy. And Mayor Jackie, last but not least.
Yeah, one of the things that I have been doing myself is checking my own bias. I think that's really important. And then to also understand why you're silent when an issue arises or comes up in the workplace or in the social setting. I think you have to address that for yourself and acknowledge that we all have work to do. And I'm learning a great deal about that work. In fact, working with Sui Lang even this year as well. So, and then everyone needs to remember you have to create this environment of respect by having the courage to call out disparaging remarks that might happen in a meeting. And I've seen this year as well. And I think you have to not only call it out, but don't allow that person to say, well, I didn't mean anything by it. I think you have to kind of make it clear that regardless of intent, remarks can be hurtful and they should not be dismissed and or tolerated. So sometimes you got to be brave just in a moment. And that's really important if you want to create a safe environment for people to work in and be a true ally.
Love it. Well, just a sincere thank you to all of you. This conversation was incredible. It just gives you such hope to hear these conversations and the dialogue that we created. And so a sincere thank you for all of you participating. I'm going to turn the time back over to Sui Lang now so she can kind of wrap us up and get us on our way.
Wow, thank you so much, Chad, for leading such an informative, meaningful, and unifying conversation. It's a good thing I was on mute because I was making a whole lot of noise in my office during that whole conversation. I oftentimes refer to the work that we do as being in the business of opening hearts and minds. And I believe that is exactly what this conversation has done today for so many of us. And see, this is what happens when we bring together the community through the power of conversation. And Troy, loved what you said. The core of allyship is friendship. I consider every single one of you my friends, and I hope the audience does too. Thank you to our panelists, the Honorable Jackie Biskupski, Representative John McCrostie, Troy Williams, and Jackie Cole. I have thoroughly enjoyed listening and learning from each of your stories, your perspectives and experiences. My understanding of what members of the LGBTQIA+ community experience on a day-to-day basis has been deepened. And my hope is to simply become a better ally. We thank you for your courage and your willingness to share. I am now pleased to announce our next community speaker series will be in the fall, mid-September, and we'll examine the Diversity in Utah Data Book that Zions Bank commissioned the Kem Gardner Policy Institute to produce. Now, this data book was released just last month on May 6th, so it is hot off the presses. And the best part is it is available for everyone to download from the Kem Gardner Policy Institute's website. It is our hope that community organizations and leaders just like you will use this data to inform the design and delivery of your diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. By making informed decisions, together we can achieve our ultimate goal, which, as Scott Anderson relayed earlier in this conversation, to build economic inclusion. And we do that by opening opportunity, increasing access, and investing our capital. And when I say capital, I mean human capital, our people, social capital, our relationships, the trust that we build with our teams, our clients, and ultimately our community, and the financial capital, our monetary investments. So stay tuned for more information. And to our Zions employees, I also wanted to announce that our DMICC Employee Business Forum, that is an acronym for disabilities, mental illnesses, and chronic conditions. Employee Business Forum will be hosting a forum this Thursday, June 24th, from noon to 1 p.m. featuring Daryl Despazzi. Daryl is a social entrepreneur and social media influencer, also runs social media for Equality Utah, so he is absolutely an ally. We look forward to hearing his thoughts and experience on advocating for yourself. That is the next step in this conversation. Please refer to our One Zions Diversity Insider monthly email for details and check out our One Zions DEI homepage on the Zions Bank intranet. Well, that concludes today's community speaker series. One voice, one story, one conversation, can make the difference. And thank you again for joining us today. Building a culture of inclusion begins with us. It begins with me. It begins with Scott, Chad, Jackie, John, Troy, and the other Jackie. And ultimately, it begins with you. Until next time, have a fantastic rest of your day.